Hey YouTube, it's Jason. I'm gonna come back and with videos on my latest project. In case you were wondering, several months ago, maybe even a year ago, I deleted all my content on my channel because YouTube decided to attack my other most favorite hobby, which is target shooting. Without going into too much detail, things were looking kind of ugly back then, but they backpedaled a lot and took a more moderate stance on the subject, so I feel good enough to put my quick and dirty videos on, even though they're not all that great, but it might be fun to look at. I always like looking at other people's projects, so hopefully you enjoy looking at mine as it goes in progress. Anyways, this is the Trumpeter 1/200 scale Bismarck. I am going full retard on it as far as details and enhancements and accuracy corrections. Take a walk with you through my project as it stands currently and point some of those things out and see what you think. First off, I have done a lot of work on the lower hull itself. I've totally redone the shape from how it comes out of the box. I did that by getting hold of a set of plans and shrinking them down to 1/200 scale, then making reverse cross-section pieces, which I used as a guide to profile the hull to be more accurate, as the kit itself was pretty much a big canoe. It's one of those things that took tons of work, tons of effort, and nobody will ever know because very few people know what the Bismarck should look like underneath the waterline, or above it for that matter. But it was fun for me. Let's start at the bow, and I'll show you some of the things I've done and kind of work my way back. Now, I have totally reshaped the anchor bumps where the hawse pipes would normally be. They were totally wrong, and well, I didn't really get there 100%, I guess. I put my best effort into it. One thing I encounter, in case you're wondering, is I airbrushed the hull, and then I went back, did some touch painting. I painted black inside of all the portholes to try to make them not appear quite as thick. And when I did brush painting, it turns out a lot darker than I did airbrushing. So all this stuff is eventually going to go away. But for now, it's in progress, and that's why it looks the way it does. On the stem itself, I did a great deal of reshaping. Spent a lot of time looking at historic pictures to try to get that at least somewhat right. I sharpened the bow itself from the kit, and the bump at the bottom, whatever this is called, the bulbous bow, is all reshaped as well. Now for the deck, I'm using a product that comes from a company called Scale Decks. I've had a lot of problems with it, but I do really like the way it looks at this point anyways. I'll talk more about that later. I'm also using the Pontos Super Detail sets, the KA Mark I detail sets, and Veterans model parts on this ship. The original kit doesn't have these metal closures where the anchor goes on. And sorry, I'm not a nautical man. I don't know all the terms, but these are actually little resin pieces that I've worked into it to try to make it look like one piece. The breakwaters aren't in yet or done. They're just set there for dramatic effect. There's a lot of cleanup I had to do on them, so I got them all cleaned up, but that's as far as I've gotten there so far. Bring it forward a little bit here. Now I am trying to build Bismarck as she appeared in The early winter of 1940, November, December-ish. That means that there are a lot of changes from the base kit for add-ons and improvements that were made on the ship and are only refit. Speaking of she, I insist on calling Bismarck a she. I'll be damned if I let Nazis turn 200 years of nautical tradition on its head by calling this ship a he, so don't even go there with me. Anyways, some of the changes, and I'll point them out as I go on. And the first refit, Bismarck proved to have problem with water ingress into all these little vents here. So they did a bunch of things to try to limit that, like putting hoods over them, and this particular one turning the other way around. Something you might want to note, there should be 2 little vents in this area on top of this. I haven't put that in yet because I'm not sure if I'll have enough grates, but I do have a couple of little grates, so I might go back and add that later on. On the first level of the superstructure, I scraped that entirely clean, and that's all Pontos detail from the super detail kit that goes on it. I cut squares behind all the vents too. My hope there was to try to keep the grates themselves from getting filled with glue and paint. They still did in a couple spots, but all in all, I think it turned out pretty much okay. On the bridge, there are 2 little covered boxes that are on the last refit of the Bismarck here and here, which I deleted. Those were added on later, and they weren't present when I built the ship. As far as the bridge area goes, that's still a work in progress. The rangefinder that would sit here wasn't installed yet, so that's been deleted, and a lot of work has been done on the conning tower itself, but that's got a ways to go still. Now, all these big grills are actually photo etch, and they were more or less a nightmare to put together, but man, do they look cool compared to the molded plastic ones that are there on the normal kit. The life rafts are from the KA set. I chose to use those ones over the Pontos because the Pontos gives little rubberized rings. They're like washers for sinks or something, but they're a little bit too big in my opinion, so I thought they looked better that way, using what KA offers. Plus, the KA ones come pre-painted with the micro printing on it. It says Bismarck. Hamburg? I can't remember. Let's see if we can tell. Yeah, foam won't focus. Anyways, this is a cool detail. Now, on the original kit, the layout of all these vents and some of the portholes and everything are just wrong. So there was a serious amount of remodeling going on to get all that where it is now. Another good point for a pre-refit Bismarck. These vents are full size, but they had a water ingress problem too, so they're actually cut in half and metal plates on the bottom for Bismarck as she was sunk. I guess now is as good a time as any to talk about the deck. It's still a wood deck, but all the planks are actually printed on with a laser printer, which gives you the effect of having lots of different individual planks instead of huge straight lines like you get in the other wood decks that we may be more used to doing stuff with. I love that look. The problem with this deck is that it fits horribly. I had to trim it along all edges, and if you can tell, I actually lined the edges with styrene strip. That had the benefit of making everything nice and smooth, though it's not technically accurate because on the real ship there actually would have been gutters to collect water on all ends, but at this scale I suppose it doesn't matter quite as much. Anyways, not only were the edges the fit bad, but the deck itself didn't fit in a lot of places. If we go back to the stern, it was so bad back here, and the deck didn't line up with all the molding on the original deck, that I actually had to cut these pieces off and then reinstall them afterwards. Some of them I couldn't get off in one piece, so I'm going to have to scratch those out. So that required a lot of work and was a giant pain in the butt. But we managed, got it in. Just a quick note on the portholes. They're all ground out from behind to be thinner. On the bow and some other places where they're molded poorly on the kit, I replaced them by drilling a circle hole into a little piece of styrene and inlining it in. Didn't have to do that much on the stern, but I did on the bow for most, actually all of them. You know, all the streaking is not my crappy attempt at weathering. That's what happened when I tried to touch up the portholes. So I'm going to have to hit that all thin airbrush again, like I was saying earlier. Stern also got a lot of reshaping. The kit, it's just too narrow and sharp, so I widened that out a bunch. Now, the screws aren't attached yet. I've rigged them up, so I don't have to put them in yet. I might not do that to the end, but I'm thinking about thinning those out even more. Obviously, in a real ship, they weren't shiny brass, so we'll see how that goes. Anyways, that's about where we are now. The other side is just more of the same. I'll give you a quick rundown there. Now, a note on the painting the black stripe around it, the boot top. There's no guide on the ship, so when you look at these models built online, the boot top's all over the place because everyone's pretty much just left to guess. I think that most people put it down too low when you look at the ship itself. On this section, they should be about equidistant before the boot top. Now mine's a little bit taller because I think the ship hull itself is a little bit off. So that was a compromise on my part so that it would look right in the bow and stern. My kit was more or less banana shaped in the beginning. The keel was not flat along the whole length of the ship. So I sanded down the bottom a bunch. I added material on the bow and stern sections of the keel and tried to even it out. Didn't quite get there 100%, but you know, it is what it is. So take a little bit of a view on the other side here. The 20mm guns are from the Pontos detail set. They're very small and pretty wildly detailed. Now, the superstructure pieces are permanently attached now. Since the wooden deck it goes all the way to the lip where you put these on, and the superstructure is actually on top of the wood. I felt like just trying to super glue it down was a dangerous proposition in the long term, because wood can raise and shrink and break it. So I kind of rigged up this cattywampus thing where it's actually tied down along with super glued. So I never have that problem with it coming up. Same kind of thing going here. You can see it's a little bit of a trick to get it down firmly but not deform the plastic for the hull itself, so the next layer sits on nice and tight. These strips are actually just to block the light transmittal through it for later on. I've got that through the whole superstructure. And taking a run down the back end here. This is the officers' quarters on the real ship. Now the gray-black line that goes around everything, I am trying to get accomplished by painting that first with the airbrush. Then after giving it a day to dry, I use some 1.2 millimeter tape, cover that up, and then paint the light gray. It's turning out okay. It's not perfect. When you get up super close, you see that there's little messes here and there, but when you're looking in person, you just don't see any of that stuff. There's a limit to what I can do at this point, but if nothing else, good practice. I can get better in the future. And that's about it for now. That represents maybe 100 hours of work. Funny thing about this is going to the kit instructions gets me to the end of step 3. So there's a lot to go here still. I'll give you more as I get further along, and it's definitely a very long-term build, but it's been pretty rewarding so far, and it's turning out great. Thanks for taking a look. Feel free to make comments, suggestions, rambles, and general shit posting as much as you want down in the comments, and I will talk to you later. Have a good one.